You're listening to Merykid Explains, an oral history of one artist's discography featuring facts, feelings, and most importantly, context. Now, maybe you stumbled here by accident, or perhaps you're listening on some faraway planet in some distant time, vibing off an ancient method of communication. Or maybe, just maybe, you're one of the dozens of die-hard Merykid fans that actually finds value in this content. Regardless, feel free to sit back, get comfortable, and listen along to the gentle ramblings of a man and his memories. This is Merykid Explains. I'm going to be honest about this one. The Grade 85, believe it, this is a hard one to talk about. When I think back on it in its full scope of the time in my life, the choices I was making, what I was willing to try to accomplish and sacrifice for those accomplishments, my motivations, the people I was surrounded by, who I was trying to impress, who I was trying to work with, who I was working with, who I was not impressing. When I think about all of these things, it's hard to put into words really an unbiased take on all of this. So this episode is me trying my best to remember what was going on and give a fair shake on how I felt and maybe how I was making others feel around me too. So to set the scene, I have just finished recording The Raccoon. It is my first ever full-length album. The first 4 records that I put out, folk-leaning, a little bit of rock, highly experimental as it got later and later into the catalog. Less and less reception coming from San Antonio, to the point of frustration on my end, to the point of dismissal, if not disrespect, coming from San Antonio's media. You have to remember, at this point, I was working with a national publicist who was getting me placements in magazines, larger blogs, websites, things of this nature. And the only market that we could not crack was San Antonio. It made no sense. It was completely the opposite of what should have made sense. I'll never forget my publicist at the time. Her name is Jordan, who I still keep in touch with today. Today, her firm has only catapulted into the stratosphere on the size of it. It's so big that they can't even work with me anymore. They outgrew me in the scope. They're working with Hollywood stars, and they're one of those just massively successful. But Jordan is someone I think I was Jordan's first client ever. I love her to death. Couldn't be more happy about that relationship with Jordan. But yes, I was her first client ever, and so the work we were doing at the time, I'll just never forget her telling me, San Antonio is the least professional media market that I've ever worked with. These were her words in 2010. This is coming from a professional publicist in Hollywood. And if those words mean anything to anybody listening to this, maybe this angers you, maybe this you feel personally attacked, maybe this reaffirms something that your particular experience has been like. All I know is that it did not matter what I was trying to do. It did not matter which magazines or blogs I was being featured on, the write-ups, the quality of the music, none of it mattered. San Antonio wanted little to nothing to do with Merykid. And I'll never forget, at the time, around this time, I was very ambitious, and I was creating a lot of really solid relationships, and I was also willing to take kind of bigger risks. I was really trying to figure out what would work with anything in San Antonio and my artistic career. And one night, I found myself on the phone with a guy named Justin, and Justin was at the time, manager of Death Cab for Cutie, which is a band that mattered then in 2010. Death Cab for Cutie mattered. The singer of Death Cab had recently married Zooey Deschanel, the lead actress of New Girl. Death Cab was just doing their thing, and this guy had gone to middle school with my sister. He was a grade above me. He knew who I was. We had never spoken, maybe in person. We'd certainly never hung out, but through some sort of weird series of conversations or favors, I got his phone number. I reached out to him, called him, he answered. I sort of gave him the, hey, remember me? And I got the kind of like faux familiarity of, oh yeah, wow, haven't heard from you in 20 years, and how are you? And kind of cutting right through all of it to being like, all right, bro, let's talk real. Listen, let's talk business. And the core of why I reached out to him was really to ask, like, what do I do? What do I do from the highest vantage point where you sit in the music industry? What advice can you give me or anyone in my position? I told him where I was. I told him what I had done. I told him how I was going. I told him what I wanted. And I said, what would you do? And I'll just never forget it. He said, you got to get the city behind you. That was it. You got to get the city behind you. And gosh darn it, that played, if that didn't make me want to try so much harder at the time. Because again, in all abusive relationships, we are continuously sacrificing for what we feel is the potential for the relationship. And I felt like the potential of the relationship between me and the city of San Antonio, the place I was born in, the place that I bled for, the place that I put on my back, so to speak, in my dreams. I was the hero of San Antonio. They held me on their shoulders as I went to and fro, all in the name of wanting to push San Antonio a little bit further. This is the moment where social media is climbing. Instagram hasn't happened yet. Twitter has just started to happen. Facebook is kind of entering its entering its adolescence in the sense that it's now letting just everyone can be on it, and I think the Social Network movie had recently come out, and so Facebook kind of had this like aura about it, what's cooler than a billionaire, or whatever that line is from Justin Timberlake. And everybody was being connected, the connectivity of all the cities, all the states. We were starting to learn that it didn't matter now what part of the country you were in if you wanted to be successful as an artist, because everybody could now hear you anywhere if you were given the right feature and the right thing. All of the gatekeeping at the time was done at the hands of blogs and other media outlets. Pitchfork was the main one. Pitchfork being the main one, and I wouldn't even know what the other ones were anymore. There were so many of them, but I was sort of chipping away at making my name. I was getting my name out there a little bit, and San Antonio, the buzz around the city was that we're one of the biggest cities in the country. We should have an established identity. Why aren't we taken as seriously as other cool cities? What does Austin have that we don't? All of these things. These were the things being spoken about around town, at the bars and at the general meetups and the networking events. It was a lot of hashtag city on the rise. That fucking phrase. I get flashbacks. I'll be driving, and suddenly I'll just see the words hashtag city on the rise just flash before my eyes, and I'll just snap out of whatever I'm doing just to like get it's either Sideshow Bob or Sideshow Mel in the Simpsons, just city on the rise. Those words were thrown around so much, and it almost seemed like San Antonio was more in love with the idea of being this underdog than they were actually willing to do the work. Can you imagine someone enjoying the feeling of success more than actually wanting to succeed? Impossible in the social media era. Regardless, I was actually out there doing as much work as I could, looking around saying, okay, you guys say you want this, but, there are some of us that we have a chance. Like look at me. I just landed in this blog or this website, and they liked it. And maybe we could just start gathering, rallying around those of us who are actually working, and San Antonio can make a big push. Yeah, well, no, they didn't want any of that. Everybody wanted San Antonio to succeed, but more so, they wanted to be the ones that made San Antonio succeed. So it was tricky. At a certain point, I was very frustrated. I had put out the records, got very little reaction from San Antonio, and then I took a hard pause and did a palate cleanser of sorts as an artist when I made the Raccoon. That record would not be released until December of 2010, and sometime around September of 2010, as that record was sort of being mixed and being kicked around between two different producers, I looked at what I was trying to accomplish. This is imagine me taking all of my desires, motivations, wants, etc., putting that on the table in front of me, like putting all my cards on the table, so to speak, and saying, this is what I want, this is what I'm getting, why aren't they the same thing? And what I realized at the time was that San Antonio had absolutely no interest in folk music. That without question, there was zero scene for folk music, and if there was, even less so for my type of experimental folk music. It did not register at all. My audiences consisted entirely of friends and a core group of fans, but it wasn't growing, and it wasn't really... San Antonio had very little to offer in terms of areas for venues. There was one pretty much scene in particular called the Strip, St. Mary's Strip, where if you wanted to just sort of get casual young people to go out and find music, you were going to have to play there. And there was zero scene for folk music on these places. So what I had to task myself with was a come to Jesus moment of sorts. It was, what do I have to do in order to get San Antonio to pay attention? And it dawned on me that the only way San Antonio was going to give a single shit about what I was doing was I would have to play rock music. San Antonio just historically is known as the heavy metal capital of the world. The music that we were listening to in 1999, 2000, 2001, there was a radio station called 99.5 KISS Rocks. And this was the place where they were playing, Godsmack and Mudvayne and Slipknot, Korn, Limp Bizkit, Tool, A Perfect Circle, all of these bands. If I were to, right now, put on 99.5 KISS, the exact same music would be playing. The audience is still here for it. It's all they want to listen to. San Antonio does not want to change in that sense. Recently, just to give another example, it's June 2022. A new futuristic venue just opened up in San Antonio in the last few months. It's considered like a venue of the future. Everything's virtual reality. Everything is screens and lights and AR and VR. And the inaugural headliner was the Smashing Pumpkins. I cannot make that up. 2022, the Smashing Pumpkins, followed by Papa Roach. Not the same concert, multiple concerts. Both of those acts were booked in order to launch this venue in 2022. Smashing Pumpkins and then Papa Roach. So, when I tell you that San Antonio loves its rock music, just trust me. Another thing that was happening in my life is I had just moved into a somewhat abandoned house. My parents had purchased a new home, and it was very old, and they were looking to renovate it, but in the time being, they needed someone to be living in it for insurance purposes. This is what I was told at the time. I was young and impressionable and living in a small-ish condo, and my parents asked me if I would be willing to move into this fixer-upper of a house, and I did it. Didn't have much else to, didn't have a lot of direction at the time in real estate market, that's for sure. So I moved into this sort of Fight Club-esque house. If you're familiar with the movie Fight Club, that's pretty much what this house was like. And what that provided me was a lot of freedom in regard to noise. So what I was able to start doing was setting up music equipment in the living room / kitchen, and it's a house. So 2 a.m., 3 a.m., I'm just, noodling around in the way that a 25-year-old does. And I would just plug in some stuff and start making noise. And I got really inspired by one video in particular I was watching was the White Stripes performing the song Black Math live. And when I watched it, I'm just watching not just the power of the song, which that song's incredible, but the electricity and the spark between Jack and Meg. It's palpable. Even through a YouTube video on a cell phone, you can absolutely feel the chemistry and the friction. The way that these two are playing off each other is like, it's electric. There's so much power, raw power coming through that performance. And I just made a decision right then and there. The White Stripes had actually, if I'm not mistaken, had just broken up. They were really heavily in the news. They were being featured a lot. And I decided I'm just gonna do that. I'm just gonna do the White Stripes. That was exactly the choice I made at exactly the time. I got myself an electric guitar. It was a black Strat, and it was called the Texas Fat Strat Special. It was a 2000 Strat that I bought off a friend of mine, a very good friend. His name is Roy. You've heard his name before. Roy sold me a Strat, and I put down my acoustic guitar just like Dylan did in the 60s, and I picked up the Strat, and I told myself it was time to go to work. And coincidentally, or perhaps synchronistically, around that time, I was at a network event on behalf of the radio station, and I had to do a speech, as one did in those days. I had to stand up in front of the group and just kind of say, hey, just reminding y'all, we have a radio show now where we play local music. If anybody has a demo, please give it to me. I need it. And one person came up to me at this event. It was a girl. Her name was Diana. She had bangs. She had glasses. Very cool look. She handed me the demo, and it was for a group called Heather Goes Psycho. And she said, here you go, play my band. I'm the drummer. Play this. And then she walked off. And I popped the CD in that night to listen to it, and it wasn't great, but it was cool. It was like real Riot Girl, punk rock, Tejana. Kind of singer had a kind of emo leaning, but they did a punk cover of Girls Just Want to Have Fun. It was just 3 girls in a band. They're cool. But what I saw was dollar signs. I saw Diana. I heard her playing the drums. I heard that she could keep a beat. And I said, bingo, baby. We're about to do the San Antonio White Stripes. And I reached out to her, and I kind of presented what I was trying to accomplish. I told her, hey, look, I do this type of music, but I want to do this. I'm looking for a female drummer who does punk music. I need, heavy, aggressive punk drums. And she was down to do one show. I think I only wanted to do one show, and it was really a sort of, if the universe decides that this is the way to go, I'll see it there. Her and I we had one rehearsal, and if I even remember the set list, it was Flaming Lips, Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots, but a much heavier version of it. I want to say we did a Stroke song, the one that's like, I want to be forgotten, and I don't want to be not. Yeah, those might not even be the lyrics, but I believe we did that one. We maybe did one other song. Oh, Black Math. And then there was one song that we did that was an original. And we didn't even have a name at the time. The venue actually booked it as Merykid because they just knew who I was. And we did the show. We were the last on the set. And I'll never forget, we got a little bit of applause. There weren't many people left. I think we played either after midnight or after 1 a.m. And when we did our final set, or our final song, there was like a really cool moment where her and I ended it, and it was like that sort of silence after the last note, and her and I were just like both sweating because it's San Antonio, so it's hot as shit. The venues didn't have air conditioning. And also we had just like rocked out, and like it was cool. Like we connected in that moment, and we knew there's something to this. And I'll never just forget, like one of the patrons just came up to us, and he just said, "That fucking rocked." That was it. He was like, "That was awesome." And when I tell you that was more than I'd ever received as Merykid, no one had ever just sort of broken from their own place to come up to be like, "Dude, what you're doing, do more of it." But someone did for that show. They came up to us, they said, "That rocked." And it was all I needed. Because if that was one, the next show we would have two. That's how I felt. And it would only be a matter of time until that built up. That was what I was looking for. It was what I needed. And thus, the Great 85 was born. The name came from the fact that Diana and I were both born in 1985. It was not more complicated than that. It was just some sort of comment in passing. I was born in April. She was born in, I don't remember, August or September of 85. And we were just like, what a great year. And yeah, the Great 85. The great year of 85. And that was it. That name did so much work for us. People loved it. People, especially, we had a built-in audience, especially of people who were born in 1985. Immediately, if they were born in 1985, they liked our band. And if they were born in 1984 or 86 or 87, 80, anything, it was an immediate door being opened to, I'm going to start a band called the Great 86. And, yeah, no, you won't. Like, I bet you won't. And, the Great 89. What about the 89? Everybody had something to say about it. It's just, I don't know how to describe it other than there are those magic choices you make. There are those magic moments in your life where you do something that just works. And when I tell you that the Great 85 just worked, it was exactly what I thought it was going to be, what I hoped it would be, and it became that. And so, with a lot of enthusiasm for this new project, I cast aside Merykid, more or less. It, at this point, had been a sort of multi-year investment that did not pay out the way that I recognized as success. It certainly gave me a foundation, and it gave me an established identity in town, but it was not giving me even an iota of the attention and the response that the Great 85 started to receive immediately within the first month or two of playing shows. Was leaps and bounds on a surface level ahead of where Merykid had been received in, I don't know, years. And I was just ready for something new. I was ready for something fresh. The Great 85 gave me an outlet suddenly for a bigger presence, a bigger name, louder, brighter, more noise. Now I had another person in the band. Suddenly I was doing 50% of the work, but receiving 200% of the results that Merykid was getting. So from all angles, it was hard for me not to justify just pivoting into the Great 85, and that's what I did. And what came with that was a lot of connection that I had established with Merykid, a lot of know-how, a lot of experience, a lot of stage presence, a fundamental understanding of songwriting, and unfortunately, what also came with that was a sort of fuck you attitude that came with like, you're going to pay attention to me now. You shouldn't have. It came with a chip on my shoulder. The chip on my shoulder being something that grew and grew alongside everything else, which, I'll revisit in a minute. So the Great 85 hits the ground running in late 2010, and at the exact same time, this is a very interesting element of this story and this time in our lives, especially in San Antonio. At the exact same time that the Great 85 is starting, and by that I mean I think our second show ever took place alongside this event. A producer whose name is Gordon Raphael suddenly announces he's moving to San Antonio. He's going to invest in the local scene of San Antonio, Texas, and he's going to put all of his efforts there, and that's where he'll be located. And why is Gordon Raphael relevant? Well, Gordon Raphael is and was the producer of the first two Strokes records. The big ones, the good, not good is subjective, but the ones that mattered. The ones culturally that shifted in indie rock. Is the Sid and Room on Fire. Gordon Raphael was the producer for both of those records. We're talking about not just a name, but a mega name, a mega superstar producer suddenly announces publicly, I'm moving to San Antonio, Texas. This is exactly at the same time as the Great 85 starting. And a guy, because of my radio show and the sort of established identity I had as a liaison for local music, a representative, Gordon's sort of like handler / a kid living in San Antonio who was, I guess, like he had the connection to Gordon and had sort of inspired him to consider moving into San Antonio, come look at all this stuff that's happening. One day I got a phone call or an email or a message, and it was just this kid saying like, hey, I am working with Gordon Raphael. He's moving to San Antonio. We want your radio show to be a big part of what's happening. And fast forward to suddenly I'm sitting at the airport in San Antonio, and here comes Gordon Raphael. And he's suddenly sitting in the front seat of my car, and I'm the guy who picked this dude up from the airport and drove him to his apartment, wherever he was staying, or hotel, I don't even remember. But that's how deeply sort of invested I was into the beginning of that movement that was happening in San Antonio. I was the guy that picked up this dude from the airport. Where that situation went was, the best way I would describe it was tragic, but a lot of things that were happening at the time were tragic. It was a reflection of San Antonio wanting to grow faster than it was capable of doing. How I would describe the Gordon Raphael experiment, and let me also say this, I would say like two things happened the last week of 2010. Two things. One, the Raccoon gets released. I don't play a show. I don't make a big deal out of it. I'm full on Grade 85. Maybe I casually mention it online or something. We do a full press, just like with my publicist, do a full press release. It gets great listings. I actually get a few features in San Antonio this time on the Raccoon. The local magazine that I have mentioned multiple times in the past, which had described my work as less than enthusiastically as why would anybody want to hear this, gave me a 5 out of 5 stars on this on the Raccoon. They had a lot of great things to say about it. It was very positive. I got multiple features in multiple local magazines, the first time ever. And wouldn't you know it, it's exactly when I wasn't working with Merykid anymore. That's just kind of how it works. So the Raccoon comes out the last week of December. It's sort of the end of Merykid, and it's not even ceremonious. It's just kind of like Merykid, just sort of the ship of the Raccoon just sort of sputters and falls into the ocean. And the other thing that happened was Gordon Raphael was named, well, Rolling Stone magazine announces their best albums of the decade, and The Strokes, I don't remember which one it was. It was either Is This It or Room on Fire, but whichever one it was, produced by Gordon Raphael, is named the best album of the decade, the most important album of the decade. Largely in part due to the sound that Gordon achieved on his production. And with that in mind, keep in mind this should have been, with even a semblance of business savvy, with even the slightest inclination to reach out to a publicist to announce this moment where the producer of Rolling Stone's album of the decade has announced San Antonio as the next Seattle. With one press release, we could have just shifted the culture, and we could have shifted the interest in San Antonio in any direction. God only knows. There's nothing that's not a story until it is. And by that I mean, like, there's no reason that Rolling Stone magazine or any other magazine wouldn't have bit on the idea that there's a new cool scene popping up in a town that we never really thought was cool. That's exactly what Seattle was for grunge. That's what everybody was looking for. What's the next Seattle? LA is this, New York is this, Nashville is this. What's next? Everybody wants a city like San Antonio to become interesting and unique and beneficial to the music scene, because the music industry wants to keep going. They need music to be interesting. They need a new hook. And one fucking press release at that time could have injected life into so much, and it really could have just given a lot of people more opportunities to keep churning out music and doing the work and investing in a new thing. Never happened. Nobody ever even tried to capitalize on the fact that Gordon Raphael moved to San Antonio in order to create an identity and quote unquote, be the next Seattle or whatever. I don't even recall people being excited that he was here. Again, this is the same city that in 2022 is celebrating Papa Roach headlining a venue. Absolutely zero interest in establishing an identity that would in any way give us the foundation to, attract new talent or build the talent we have here. None of it happened. Gordon was a really unique guy, and what I recall was quickly stopped the whole San Antonio's the next Seattle vibe and quickly moved into literally, I'll work with anyone that pays me money, which turned into a bunch of like little kids. Like, the only network that his handlers had were like rich people with like their little kids who wanted to make pop songs. It was so mishandled, embarrassingly so, in my opinion. Nothing came of it. I think he released one record for a rock band, for a band called Education. And it was okay. It had a real grungy, grimy, indie. It had a pretty cool sound. There were a couple of really solid tracks. It amounted to nothing. There was absolutely zero attempt to capitalize on any national press. I remember being invited to meetings from like this group of people. It was like a think tank about how to best utilize Gordon's time here. I'm not even kidding. This is the way that people were treating this shit. And here's how it went. I was brought in because of the radio show, invited to the meetings, exactly 2 meetings into this weekly meetup. For the umpteenth time, as I was ignored or sort of brushed aside, saying like, release one press release. Guys, just one. Just make one announcement and put it out. They stopped inviting me to the meetings, and within the month of Gordon getting there, his people stopped reaching out to me. Suddenly I was being shunned by this particular group of people and their musicians. I was receiving messages from other people inside the group, and I'm not even kidding. I think I received a message once that was like, hey, I just wanted you to know that even though, regardless of the trash they're talking, I really support you. And I was like, I didn't know they were talking trash. Thanks for letting me know, and also thanks for selling them out. So I sit here and I think about it now. It just quickly, it was like watching a ship sink. It was weird. This huge opportunity, this insane opportunity, run by people that had absolutely no idea what they were doing, and that's good for them, honestly. The people that were in charge of this project, of bringing Gordon in and sort of trying to establish the San Antonio as the new Seattle, the people who were in charge of that decided that they were going to put their money on their intuition. And they failed spectacularly. At this point, most of the people, and I'm not going to name names, every person that was highly involved in the inner circle is either in jail, on drugs, or lives in another country. The one who lives in another country is Gordon. Gordon left America after the San Antonio situation. He was here for about a year. He never released anything other than the one Education album. And everybody that was involved with him made horrible decision after horrible decision. It was like a horror movie from my perspective. Because if you've been listening this whole time, you know that my dream, just the reason I went to sleep, the reason I woke up, the reason I made decisions from an artist standpoint, all of it was to help build San Antonio. Here comes the best opportunity that this city probably will ever have up to this point. And up to this point, it's the best one they've ever had. To establish any kind of identity, I was just so willing to do whatever to make it work. I would do whatever I was doing. I was giving them so much of my time and energy and effort. They were using my radio show. I was driving them around. I was giving them clients. I was introducing them to people. I was doing anything I could to just be a part of the team, only to watch them make terrible decisions. And like I said, it only took a couple of weeks of me questioning what they were doing and injecting with a sort of like, here's my opinion. This seems like pretty standard logic, guys. Here's my thoughts, to them just completely writing me out of it. And for the most part of Gordon's year-long stay in San Antonio, I was just cast out of it. The Great 85, alongside Gordon, was growing and growing and growing. I'm talking, was going from, it started when Gordon appeared, and within half a year, we were selling out venues. And if you want to talk about, again, it's like from an outside perspective, they were looking for us. Gordon came in to find a band like the Great 85, and they were just so fucking blind and stupid. And it didn't have to be. I mean, like, I only use the Great 85 as an example because objectively, we were a hot band with an indie sound that was looking to grow and grow. I mean, like, we were selling out clubs within half a year. Gordon was there, but it was just like, don't work with this guy. Like, I had been blackballed by this group. And they just missed, and who knows, and if they missed something that obvious, that means that they missed 1,000 other things that were just as obvious, if not a little less. If you're listening to this, guys, the people who were in that inner circle, I want you to know that I don't blame you for, betting on yourself. But my God, you guys were fucking idiots. Moving on to the Great 85. So the Great 85 now, Diana and I. 2011 has begun. The last Merykid record has been released. And we are going full force. Her and I have decided this is working. This is it. Our crowds are getting better. We're getting better. We're practicing all the time. People love the gimmick. People are really getting into the guy-girl dynamic. A lot of speculation starts to come up. Are they dating? Are they this? Are they that? It was such a package. It was absolutely ripped off from the White Stripes. But again, remember, the White Stripes weren't around anymore. There was a gaping hole for that sort of energy and entertainment. And in San Antonio, suddenly you were finding it. Diana was very smart, a very hard worker, very good looking, very cool, had exactly the vibe that people wanted to like come and they wanted to see her rock the drums. I was also very smart, very business minded, able to use what we had created and leverage opportunities all over the town. Other cities. Suddenly we started getting invited to play bigger, like outside of San Antonio. It just became something that people wanted to be there. They wanted to see it. It was cool. It was everything that I had ever hoped, and it was everything that I believed could be achieved with the right pieces in play. It was like this chessboard. Suddenly it just opened up, and I was wrecking on this board. The sky was really the limit at this point, and in part 2, we're going to talk about how it fell apart.